Hi there, and welcome to A Song of Ice and Fire Explained. This is a video series where we explain the massive conspiracies going on in A Song of Ice and Fire. If you haven't seen our previous videos, we suggest watching those first. So let's continue on with Eddard 1, A Game of Thrones. This chapter is 3,794 words long, and is told from the perspective of Eddard Stark, the son of Rickon Stark and younger brother to Brandon Stark. In this chapter, King Robert Baratheon arrives at Winterfell with his party, where he offers Lord Eddard Stark the position of Hand of the King, and proposes a betrothal between Eddard's daughter, Sansa, and his own son, Prince Joffrey. This chapter introduces King Robert and the Lannisters, Ned's relationship with Robert, the Crypts of Winterfell, the history of Robert's rebellion, and the mystery surrounding Lyanna Stark's final words, "Promise me, Ned." The King's party, 300 strong, rides into Winterfell. Eddard recognises Sir Jaime Lannister, Tyrion Lannister, Prince Joffrey Baratheon, and Sandor Clegane, but does not recognise his old friend King Robert. Until Robert calls out. Eddard is shocked to see that Robert has gained 8 stone, 112 pounds, since they last saw each other 9 years ago during the Greyjoy Rebellion. Eddard pays respect to Queen Cersei and the younger children. No sooner had those formalities of greetings been completed, the king said to his hosts, "Take me down to your crypt, Eddard. I would pay my respects." Ned loved him for that, for remembering her still, after all these years. Queen Cersei objects, but is completely disregarded by Robert, and quietly led away by Jaime. Ned asks Robert about his journey, and Robert complains of the distance that had to be travelled and the vast emptiness of the north. Robert then describes the advantages of living in the south, telling Ned the wonders he must see, the food, the flowers, the wine, and the women. However, Ned sees the toll these pleasures have had as they descend into the crypts, which is difficult for the out-of-shape Robert. They pass the dead of House Stark with statues in front of the tombs, each lord holding a sword on his lap with a direwolf at his feet. They arrive at the last of the occupied crypts. Here, there are 3 tombs for Ned's father Rickard, his eldest brother Brandon, and his sister Lyanna. Robert declares Ned should have buried Lyanna on a sunny hillside, but Ned explains that she was a Stark of Winterfell and belongs here, as was her wish. Ned remembers her dying. "I was with her when she died," Ned reminded the king. "She wanted to come home, to rest beside Brandon and father." He could hear her still at times. "Promise me," she had cried. "In a room that smelled of blood and roses. Promise me, Ned." Her fingers had clutched his as she gave up her hold on life, the rose petals spilling from her palm, dead and black. After that, he remembered nothing. They had found him still holding her body, silent with grief. The little Kragan man, Hallan Reed, had taken her hand from his. Ned could recall none of it. "I bring her flowers when I can." So, it seems pretty obvious that Lyanna died in childbirth, but there might be more to this mystery than what the show presents us with. Robert recalls taking his vengeance on Rhaegar for what he did to Lyanna and regretting that he only got to kill him once, and reveals that he dreams about him every night. Ned suggests that they return to the surface where Robert's wife will be waiting. Robert replies that the others can take his wife, but they start back all the same. As they return, Ned asks about Jon Arryn, and Robert declares that he has never seen a man die so quickly, from healthy to dead within a fortnight. Ned asks how Jon's widow, Lysa, is bearing her grief, explaining that Catelyn fears for her sister. Robert confides that he thinks Jon's death has driven Lysa mad, and that she has taken her son back to the Eyrie. Robert had hoped to foster the sickly boy with Tywin Lannister, but Lysa refused to hear of it and left in the dead of night. Cersei was furious. Ned, who does not trust Tywin, is relieved. Ned asks to foster Robert Arryn himself, but Tywin's already agreed. And Ned taking him as a ward would be an insult to Tywin. Ned comments that Robert should visit the Wall, but Robert responds that he has more important concerns, such as replacing Lord Arryn, who held several important positions, such as Warden of the East. Ned reminds Robert that the title traditionally goes with the domain of House Arryn, but Robert declares that he would not appoint 6-year-old Robert Arryn as Warden of the East. Ned reminds Robert that during times of peace, the title is only an honor. The king is not pleased, the son is not the father, though maybe when the boy is grown, the title will be given back. Robert mentions that he also needs a new hand of the king, and offers the position to Ned so they can work together again. Then Robert tells Ned how the responsibilities bore him and complains that he is surrounded by flatterers and fools. He insists that he wants Ned to come south to King's Landing, to be Hand of the King, the second most powerful man in the realm. Ned does not want the position and tries to declare himself unworthy of the honour. Robert jokes that he is not trying to honour Ned, but to get him to run his kingdom for him, spouting the low-born saying that the king eats and the hand takes the shit. Robert asks for at least a smile, but Ned replies that it is to be so cold in the north that a man's laughter freezes in his throat and chokes him to death. King Robert then offers to marry his son, Prince Joffrey, to Ned's 11-year-old daughter, Sansa Stark, to join the houses of Stark and Baratheon as he and Lyanna were supposed to. Ned hesitates to make this decision, wishing to speak to his wife. Robert asks him not to take too long. Ned is filled with a sense of foreboding, knowing that Winterfell is where he belongs and that winter is coming. And this is where Eddard 1, A Game of Thrones ends. Now, onto the theory portion of the video. It is suspicious that Ned buried Lyanna and Brandon in the crypts of Winterfell, because even though Ned tells us that is what Lyanna wanted, statues are only meant for the lords and kings of Winterfell. There are many theories for why Lyanna was buried in the crypts, but none of them seem conclusive as to why she was buried there. So if you're interested to see what might have happened at the Tower of Joy, check out Preston Jacobs' video series. Since, like Preston, we also believe there was probably a baby swap at the Tower of Joy involving House Dane and the Kingsguard. We also believe Mance Rayder is secretly Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, since he was able to best Jon Snow in single combat in A Dance with Dragons and knows way too much about Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms for an ordinary turncloak. Here is a video from the Order of the Green Hand that explains this theory in greater detail, if you're interested. But again, this is just speculation. In future videos we'll come back to the baby swap idea and Mance Rayder being Sir Arthur Dayne. And that's about it for Eddard 1, A Game of Thrones. In the next video we'll cover Jon 1 and continue from there. In the meantime, here are some of the other differences between the HBO TV show and book. Tyrion's appearance is different to his description in the books. He has stunted legs, a swollen forehead, a squashed in face, and eyes of different colours. He walks with a profound waddle. Unlike in the show, the book does not describe the following scenes: Catelyn and Luwin preparing for the feast, Robb, Theon and Jon grooming themselves for the arrival of the royal party, Bran sighting the royal party on the top of the wall, Catelyn scolding Bran for climbing up the wall, Arya watching the arrival of the royal party, House Stark and their retainers lining up to greet the royal party, and Arya's whimsy late arrival. In the book, the wheelhouse Cersei and the royal children travel in is huge. As the book goes, it is pulled by 40 heavy draft horses and is too wide to pass through the castle gates. Thus, the queen and children have to debark outside and walk into the castle. In the show, the wheelhouse is much smaller and is pulled by lesser horses into the castle. Tyrion's introduction in the books is different. He is introduced at the feast through the POV of Jon. In the show, he is introduced in a scene with the prostitute Ross after Robert Baratheon's arrival. Ross doesn't exist in the books. In the TV series, she is a recurring character. In the book, Robert does not place a feather in the hand of Lyanna's statue. Lastly, both Tommen and Myrcella are presented before the Stark children in the book and vice versa. Anyway, that's it for today's episode. If you want to see more of A Song of Ice and Fire Explained, please like, share, and subscribe. Also, when you get the chance, try out Fantasy Flight's A Game of Thrones board game, digital edition.